Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Money Puzzle here. Eric Douglas here with Aaron McAndrew, obviously a production of Family Wealth Planning Partners. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a little bit of a different topic than we typically normally do. This one's going to be probably far more behavioral, a far more behavioral topic, but ultimately we're looking to talk about why waiting to retire could actually hurt you. So much of our industry is about, are you ready to retire? Are you prepared to retire? Should you continue to work as long as you can to ensure a proper retirement? We're going to do the opposite of that today, and we're going to tell you why you should just probably go ahead and retire, or signs at least, signs that you should look for that tell you, yeah, I'm ready to pull the trigger. I'm ready to go ahead and take that leap into retirement and look forward to making the next step. That's the topic for today, and I think it's going to be interesting. We have some pretty cool things to talk about here, but the first point I want to make around this is most people are afraid to retire because they're afraid they don't have enough money.
Right.
And it's always amazing to me. These are some of the most fun conversations we get to have in our business, by the way. I love these conversations, and I can recall several off the top of my head where we've made people cry tears of joy, to be very, very clear. But when you get to tell them, yes, you are ready, you are prepared to retire, this is how we're going to do it, and we lay that out specifically. And they're just so overwhelmed because I never thought I'd be able to hear that. I just wasn't sure if I had enough. I was very unconfident about my ability to ever retire. It's amazing because most people don't really truly understand how to create a retirement income plan. They just look at the balance on their 401ks, and they don't really understand truly if that's actually enough to sustain their needs. And it's always interesting to me too. For whatever reason, $1 million is always like this magic number that people look to. Like, I have to have $1 million in order to be able to retire. And in some cases that might be the case, yes. But more often than not, that's not always the case. A lot of it depends upon your lifestyle, how much debt you have, et cetera, right? But
age at which you retire.
That's another big one there as well. But I think that's probably one of the huge mental blocks that we see that keeps people from retiring is they don't feel like they have enough money.
They don't feel like they have enough money, and there's a fear around it. But it's no secret. There's a reason why they continue to raise that required minimum distribution age every single, last couple times they've raised it. They keep pushing that thing further and further back. Yes, people are living longer, but the other truth is people are working longer too. All of these reasons we're going to talk about today, I think, are going to play into why it could actually hurt you to continue to work as long as you would or further into your years. One of the reasons I'm going to bring up is that you're uninterested in your job. You're just doing it because if you're afraid that you may not have enough money or you're going to run out of money, and you've been doing this job for 40 some years or 50 years or whatnot. I was told, I'm going to just use a little quote here that I was told by a client of mine. He said, when I first started out in my career, he said, somebody told me to start putting money into my 403B and just start saving. He said, that's the best thing that I ever did. He did retire in his 50s. Like he retired earlier than Social Security age. But he said, that's the best thing I ever did. He goes, because if you sit there and think about it, he said, the trade-off is horrible if you think about this. He was like, if I was to tell you're going to go to school for 20 some years, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to work for 40 years. And then after that, you're going to get to enjoy less than 20 years in retirement. Mm-hmm. How does that sound?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody wants that trade-off, but nobody thinks of it like that. And it kind of brought a light to me. And I use that now in client conversations when I'm trying to show them when they are ready for retirement. You can retire. You're now working because you want to work. And that usually is a better feeling.
Well, especially for those clients that, just anybody really that's working through their late 60s and they go to retire, let's say at, 67, 68 years old. Well, you're at an age now where you have a relatively limited window of opportunity there to really, let's say, check off those bucket list items. Or, to do the trip. I'll use my mom as an example. My mom has a traveling companion. Well, I should say she had a traveling companion, but they went on, it was actually delayed a couple years because of COVID. They were supposed to do this big international cruise in 2020. They weren't able to do it until 2022. But they went overseas. They went, hit up England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, and it was a fantastic trip. Unfortunately, my mom was saying her travel companion it was probably going to be the last international trip that she's ever able to take because time catches up to all of us, right? And she just wasn't able to move around. She wasn't quite as mobile as she was even in 2020. She's lost some mobility and just health-wise just wasn't as in good of a position as she was just a couple of years prior. So she's probably at a point where she's really done taking big trips. And she still has a lot of life left in her, don't misunderstand. But it's sad to hear that, and it's something that, you just wish that some of those experiences maybe could have been had when she was a little bit younger, when she was in a better position to enjoy them more, to create better memories.
Yeah, when you're working later in your career and you're working, I guess, further, too far down the road, if you're burned out on your job, that has negative health effects on you. If you're uninterested in the job, that's not good for you, nor the business, to be quite frank, but that also has negative health effects on you. So what I've seen quite a bit is the people who typically work into their 70s, like continue to work in the 70s, when they finally retire, they don't do anything because their health starts deteriorating and their quality of life becomes not as good as what it was. They almost go quicker than the people who retired
No,
early.
they don't almost. And
Yeah.
it's because you're leading me into my next point. There actually have been studies shown that if you retire in your early 60s, you actually get to enjoy a much longer retirement because you live longer.
Mm-hmm.
And someone
less
who waits,
stress.
There's less stress, but than someone who retires at 70 for a couple of reasons. And these are what the studies have shown. But someone who retires later in life at 70, their entire identity is more likely to be wrapped up in work because in all likelihood, they probably didn't have anything to retire to. And when you do pull the plug and you do retire at a later age, to the point I was just making, you don't have as much time. You're probably not in as good of health, or you just don't have the energy to be able to do some of the things that you always envisioned yourself to do in retirement. And so it almost becomes a lonelier retirement because you're almost getting started maybe at a later date than other people your age. But the average time spent in retirement for someone that retires at 70 is actually less than 2 years. Whereas it's a far longer retirement for someone who retires in their early 60s. They're obviously, those are the ones that are far more likely to hit life expectancy because typically if you're retiring early, it's usually because you have something to retire to. You have something to look forward to in retirement. You have things to keep you busy. Those that work later in life typically don't have anything to retire to, or they're only working because they can't afford to not
right.
work.
Or they think they can't afford to not work.
Too much stress in life, and a lot of it is self-imposed, can really eat away at you. And part of the reason, one of the big reasons why you want to retire is to remove the stresses of work.
Right.
So you don't have to think about those things. And it's interesting because another conversation that we have with a lot of, I'll say pre-retirees, let's say someone who comes in at 61, 62 years old, and they're thinking that they have to work until 66, 67. And we show them a way where, no, 62, 63, you can retire. This is how we'll make it work. You're free to pull the plug on your working career and move on to the next phase. It actually makes them enjoy their work more,
right?
Because they know that at any time they can take that job and shove it,
mm-hmm.
because they don't need to be there. They're not working any longer because they have to work. They're working because they want to work,
right?
And they don't feel the stress of having to work to a certain age just to feel like they can comfortably retire.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about how it can hurt you health-wise. Let's talk a little bit about how it can hurt them tax-wise. Let me just paint a picture for you. If you're somebody working into your 70s, now you can collect Social Security at full retirement age and not be penalized on your income. But if you're somebody that's working into your 70s and you've delayed Social Security, or you are collecting Social Security at full retirement age, you're still paying more taxes on your Social Security than what you would need to be paying or would otherwise be paying it on there. But also, most people who are working are also deferring dollars into a 401k, and usually it's pre-tax money that they're putting into 401k or 403b or some sort of retirement plan. When they're doing that deferral, when they go to retire, they almost have to take required minimum distributions immediately at that point. At 73, if you're working into your 70s, you basically almost have to take required minimum distributions immediately. You're not having to do that from a 401k plan as long as you're actively working, but once you hit required minimum distribution age and you are no longer working, you're going to have to start pulling that money out, which again, yes, you delayed your Social Security, you got that higher Social Security payment, but now that required minimum distribution may negatively affect you tax-wise.
And the reality is, too, we talk a lot about Roth conversions with clients. And it can be a very valuable strategy for some people. I think sometimes it's overused as a topic of conversation versus the actual effectiveness for most people. But Roth conversion strategies can be very, very, very helpful for a lot of folks. But it's tough to utilize those Roth conversion strategies if you're still working and you're in a high tax bracket. And it's tough to do those until you maybe do fully go to retire, and we can start implementing some of those tax strategies that might be more beneficial for you long term.
A lot of times people are working into their 70s because they're either afraid that they don't have enough money, or they do have enough money and they're afraid to spend it. So what ends up happening to those people who are afraid to spend that money? Clearly, if they do live past their required minimum distribution age, they will have to take those RMDs and they'll have to take money out. But usually what happens is they work into their 70s, they finally do retire, they don't have a long lifespan, they end up passing away early, and then all of that money that they were afraid to spend gets passed on to their heirs. That could or could not be that may or may not be a good thing even for the heirs at this point, because there's the stretch IRA has been eliminated. So if it's all pre-tax dollars that are in that account and you're passing that money on to your kids and they're at an age where and you'll say you pass away in your 70s or 80s and they're at an age where they're in their highest income earning years, now they have 10 years to draw that money out in retirement. So all of this again goes back to financial planning, making sure that your plan's in place, but why working too long really can hurt you.
Well, I think I'll even add, this isn't strictly necessarily talking about health specifically, maybe mental health to some degree, but I think a lot of people delay retirement as well because they don't want to go home. It is something that we've seen where you get the sense that maybe not all is well in the home, or they don't want to go home because maybe they're more stressed at home. Maybe there's marital issues and you get to that age and you feel like it's too late to resolve them or fix them or do something about them. And so I think this ties into health, because in order to enjoy a long retirement, you need to be in good health. You need to take care of your body. And we probably don't spend enough time as an industry talking about the importance of health in your retirement, because it's not just about whether or not you have enough money. And we focus far too much on money sometimes. And I'm guilty of it just like everyone else is. But you need to focus on your health as well. The number one determinant of whether or not you're able to enjoy your money is how healthy you are. Right. And at the end of the day, the only currency that we have in life is health. But that also goes to mental health as well. Talking about the state of your marriages, the state of your relationship with your kids. If you've spent a professional career neglecting some of those things, when it does come time to retire, you're going to be a miserable person, because this kind of goes back to the idea that you don't necessarily have something to retire to.
Right.
You don't have those plans with your spouse that you've been putting off. You don't have these plans to travel or garden together or go out to eat more or whatever they may be. And so it's very important to focus on your personal situation, your home situation. You don't want to focus so exclusively on your professional life where it's hurting your personal life at home.
Right.
And once again, we see it far too often. Not terribly often, but the fact that we see it at all, I think, is far too often.
Yeah, it's more and more. It's becoming more and more that you see it. Again, it's not every day, but we see it more now than you would have seen it 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago even.
Well, even the people that we see retiring now, think about it this way. The people that are retiring now were the people that came of professional age in the 80s. What was the 80s? Greed is good. Everybody work. That the work-life balance didn't exist. There were a lot more stay-at-home spouses back then, and things were different then, and that was the way that they came up. The work-life balance that we see today, at least in younger generations, let's say Gen Xers and below, that they focus far more on work-life balance than the older generation does, the boomers, if you will. And so now that we have a wave of boomers that are coming into retirement, those are the ones that focus far more on work than their personal lives. And
when you've done that for 40 years, it's hard to walk away from it.
Exactly. That's your identity. To the point I was making earlier, your identity is wrapped up in what you do and not who you are. And so it's very, very important before you go to retire, because you can mask a lot of these issues when you're still working.
Yeah.
You really can.
You're right.
But unfortunately, if you have health problems or something precludes you from being able to work, all of that stuff comes rushing to the forefront. And it becomes a much, much, much bigger problem if you've been kicking that can down the road for years and years and years. And now you're all of a sudden forced to face these personal issues in your life. And so it's really important that you focus far more on your personal life and getting that in order and being happy at home, being happy with your loved ones, more so than saving an extra couple of bucks to feel like you're able to retire. Right. Don't focus so specifically on the money, because the money is going to come, the money's going to go, but at the end of the day, that's not what makes you happy. Your health and the quality of your personal life, that's what's going to determine your happiness.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What else do you have? Anything else to add on that?
I think we've discussed all my thoughts. So.
Yeah, and this goes back, we've talked about this before, but this talks about the behavioral aspect of what we do. And this is why it's so important for us to talk to our clients about what's going on in their lives. When we're trying to construct a full-scale, comprehensive financial plan, it's important to understand what's important to you, what's important to your spouse. We don't want to meet with one spouse and not the other, right? We want to meet with both spouses. We want to meet with your kids. We want to meet with the family. We want to meet with everyone that's a stakeholder, if you will, in your retirement plan. And we want to understand how best we can optimize that plan for all parties involved. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Make sure you're focusing on yourself, focusing on your personal life, and make sure you're not neglecting those things at home, all for the sake of making a few extra bucks at work. This is Eric Douglas, Aaron McAndrew with Family Wealth Planning. If anything that we said today hits home with you, or you think any of your friends and family might benefit, we would greatly appreciate if you could share our content. If you would like to schedule your risk-off retirement strategy session with us, please click the link in the show notes, whether that's on your podcast platform or on our YouTube channel. You can schedule a call or schedule a meeting directly with us from there. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.